Hello, everyone. Sorry for the little delay in the beginning. I am really excited to welcome all of you to this webinar on integrating mindfulness into social emotional learning. And I think this is such an important topic right now, especially with everything that we are all dealing with, but especially teachers and students. And that will be our focus for today. I am a professor and a chair at Cal State Fullerton in the Department of Special Education. I have been at Cal State Fullerton since 2001, and I was at Cal Poly Pomona as an assistant professor for 3 years prior to that. My research areas focus on teacher training, affective characteristics such as social skills, self-concept, and loneliness in adolescence, as well as evidence-based best practices in literacy. Before all of those years, when I've been teaching at the university level, I was a teacher for 8 years in a special day class setting in elementary, junior high, and high school in 2 different districts. And since 1990, I have been either a teacher, a consultant in schools, supporting teachers through professional development and teacher training at school sites, and also conducting research with teachers in their classrooms. I have 3 kids. I have 1 host daughter from Rwanda, and I've had 15 foster children in and out of my home, and all of them have been my guinea pigs. So the information that I share today is personal information, research information, and anecdotal stories and strategies that I've seen work in classrooms. So I want you to think today, who are you and why does this matter? What is your vibe as a teacher, or what will your vibe be? Are you a positive teacher? Do you have an intimidating nature about you? What are your top 2 core values for life and for your teaching career? So what matters the very most to you? More than just your vibe, but what are those values that are going to drive how you teach children, how you affect their lives, how you make a difference on a daily and hourly basis? If you're currently a teacher, how are you teaching social emotional learning? Is this important to you? Is this a part of your curriculum in any way? Is this built in, or is it just something you know because you were trained well in your own family with social skills, or from a teacher or a mentor? Are you currently teaching mindfulness if you're a teacher? Is it something that you slow down and have a few minutes each morning when your students walk into the classroom, or at the beginning of a middle school or high school period, where everyone can settle into the classroom, take a deep breath, and really learn how to focus on the moment and where they are in the present? So here are a few questions for you to think about that might guide our work together today. After the webinar, you can take the time to watch 2 different videos on YouTube that would be very helpful in framing mindfulness, hearing youth perspectives, as well as the relationship between mindfulness and social emotional learning. Both of these will be covered throughout this presentation, but I'm going to be providing you with some additional resources that you would be able to use and look back at when the presentation is concluded. So I've already asked you if you're teaching mindfulness and social emotional learning, if you're a teacher in a classroom, but I want to make sure that everyone is doing enough to teach it. And if you think that you're not, and that might be why you're here today with us, that you need some additional strategies that you can implement into your classroom, maybe some new perspectives, maybe a little bit of research background that'll help you learn how to better implement mindfulness and better address social emotional learning with your students, no matter what their age. So I want you to think about your own life and your own mindfulness and your own social skills in your family, with your friends, with your colleagues, with your classmates. And I want to make sure that all of us are walking the talk. You are a role model. I want you to think about the amount of people that look to you as a leader and that are watching you each and every day, and your behavior, your reactions, your responses to all of the stimuli around you. You have a lot of eyes if you're in a classroom, and you also have a lot of people in a family or friends that are noticing your behavior and your reactions and responses. Our emotional state is contagious. You know this from your home life growing up. Whoever you lived with, whatever mood they were in, it mattered and it made a difference in your day. And this is your impact as well on the world and on your classroom. So you need to remember that your responses and reactions matter, and they're contagious. They're contagious to our students around us. Thus, your relationships with anyone around you are impacted by your resilience, how you put up with a difficult situation, which we are all currently living in right now, some very, very grave difficulties, our emotional regulation, how you're able to calmly respond to different situations and your reactions to those situations, as well as your mindful awareness. Are you aware of what's going on around you? Are you reflective based on those responses and those reactions? Think about building your resilience in every situation that you face, and know that your responses need to be strong, especially when you have a lot of little eyes watching your every move. You cannot give what you do not have. We cannot talk about positive social skills and mindfulness if you are not a healthy role model for students, and if you are not able to create happy, energetic, and safe learning environments for your students. So we first have to start by examining our own lives and thinking about how to take good care of ourselves and how we can make a difference as healthy role models for our students and all of those around us. Did you know that stress is a major factor of health-related disorders? So, doctor visits related to stress comprise 60 to 90% of any time anyone walks into a doctor's office. 40% of Americans say they don't sleep well due to stress. 40%. 70% say they're stressed out because of work. 52% of Americans are worried about their health. My guess is this number is much, much higher if we were to take the pandemic-related research, which will be out soon. People are beginning to write about it, and the stress that this time of the pandemic has created an inordinate amount of stress that right now is probably not even quantifiable. So mindfulness in this time is more important than absolutely ever. Some resilience factors that you need to think about in our own lives, and then figure out how are we going to reflect on how we handle this and then teach them to our students. So a few ideas: making sure that those around you are supportive, that you're not choosing toxic relationships, that you are involved with people who are caring towards you and whom you care for greatly. Also, be thinking about realistic plans and how to meet your goals in realistic ways. My husband always says, one step at a time. When we have a child that has big plans, that's a great thing, and we want to encourage that. But we want people to have step-by-step plans and actual ways that they can complete those goals, that they can reach those goals. Another piece of resilience, just as an overview, would be a positive view of yourself and confidence in your own strengths and abilities. How are you going to get that? How can you push away those negative self-thoughts? How can you focus on being in the moment, being grateful for what you have in front of you, and feeling good about what your contributions to this earth might be? Another area of resilience would be communication and problem-solving abilities. This is something that as teachers, we get really good at because we're presented with many different problems. Having great communication and figuring out how to make sure that we remain calm and that we communicate clearly to our students is really, really important at problem solving and dealing with anything that we might face in the classroom. And then finally, how to manage your feelings and your impulses, your reaction to the stimuli that comes in front of you. How can we take a deep breath, be in the moment, and give it a second before we respond, and give an opportunity to reflect and think on how we're going to handle that particular situation. So how can we build this resilience, and how can we teach those goals and those factors? Number one would be making connections. How do we make connections with people? How do we carefully get into groups? How do we attract people to our personalities? Is it by our caring? Is it by our listening skills? Is it by our facial features in our calm demeanor and our smile and our positive eye contact and our non-intimidating stance? Is that one way that we bring people toward us? I think so. Another way might be that any scenario we face is not going to be impossible for us to fix. It's not insurmountable. Everything that happens to us, we know that we're going to get through it. And we have to think about that on a daily basis, because teachers sometimes are presented with some very, very difficult scenarios. And we have to know what to do and where to go with those scenarios to get some help so that we know that none of our problems are insurmountable. Also, we have to accept that change is part of living, that's natural and normal. We have to know how to move toward our goals. What would be the first step in meeting my new goal? How do I take decisive action? Sometimes we have to get out of our comfort zone and move forward and actually figure out how I'm going to take that next step. I feel like I'm always looking for opportunities for self-discovery and for self-reflection. How can I think about my responses to the environment around me and know that I'm seeking out opportunities to make myself a better person and to make myself more present in this moment so that I can respond more positively to the stimuli around me? I need to nurture a positive view of myself, is to have a growth mindset and know that I'm growing each and every day and that I want to make this world a better place and that I have something to contribute to the people around me. Keeping things in perspective, knowing that right now, while we live through what we're living through in a very difficult time of the pandemic, that we know that everyone around us is living this life too, and everyone around us is facing those challenges and managing those challenges. And somehow we have to maintain a hopeful outlook. We have to know that this is going to end. We have to know that we've built great resilience going through this. And we know ultimately that we took care of ourselves during this time. After the webinar, here is an article that's wonderful for you to read. It's called How Teachers Can Build Emotional Resilience. I think it would be worth your time. And you can ask yourself, what stood out to you? What's one thing you've already done in this article? Everything that we read in research is not always brand new. It's great reminders, though, of what we can do to implement back strategies we might already know, but we're not currently utilizing. And then what's one thing that's new or that you've never tried, but that you've wanted to try? So I think that I want to encourage you to read this article on your own time after the webinar. Kabat-Zinn says that mindfulness practice is the intent to remain present in moment-to-moment experiences in a non-judgmental way. Such practice includes reflective activities or simply walking, eating, and listening with intent. Walking, eating, and listening with intent. How are you going to do that? How do you walk and just focus on the walk? Focus on step by step in front of you at each moment. When you're eating, you're enjoying the flavors, you're enjoying the colors, you're enjoying the uniqueness of that moment and knowing that it's only that moment that you're living in. And then listening with intent, not thinking what you're going to say next to respond to the person you're speaking to, but actually listening and caring. I think if we did that more often, we would have much more connectedness in our social relationships. How does mindfulness work? We've talked a little bit about our reaction to the stimuli in classrooms. There's a lot of stimuli that go on a minute-by-minute basis. Without mindfulness, the event occurs and we react. We don't take the time to be present, to think calmly about how we're going to respond. But with mindfulness, we take that stimulus in that second. We take a deep breath, we use some of our mindfulness strategies that we're going to talk about, and then we react. And that reaction is going to be a lot more appropriate, a lot calmer. It's going to feed into the positive classroom environment that you've built for your students and the safe learning space that you've given your students, because you've taken the time to breathe, to reflect, to think, to be present before you're reacting. Mindfulness actually develops our brain. It actually develops the prefrontal cortex, which gives us the ability to pause before acting on an impulse. So you'll be much less impulsive if you continue to practice mindfulness, the more you practice it. It allows for self-regulation, that's self-control, empathy, so you can actually walk in someone else's shoes, and improved decision-making, how that's going to help you respond in the future and to a similar stimuli. Some of the benefits of mindfulness, they are all over the place in the research. This is very, very easy to search in our university library, that we actually have thicker cortical regions in the brain that help us with our attention and our sensory processing. We actually change our brains to being stronger and able to handle much more. We have that heightened empathetic awareness, which we need right now in this world. There's so much negativity. We need to be able to understand each other's perspectives and each other's growth. Improved brain activation of positive affect and immune response, more specifically antibody production. You're actually physically healthier if you can have a positive affect, if you're actually thinking positively. You will have enhanced relationships just by these strategies because it improves your autonomy, closeness, and acceptance of one another by taking the time to think and reflect on someone else's perspective is going to improve that social connectedness, that understanding of the person that you're with without that judgmentalism and negativism that happens when someone might be different than you in whatever way. So there are so many benefits of mindfulness. Those are just a few. So key components that are improved by mindfulness, but it seems like teacher personal development often doesn't include the fact that mindfulness really does improve our cognitive flexibility, our metacognitive skills. So thinking about our learning, thinking about our teaching, thinking about our self-development. And that emotional regulation, self-regulation, is, as teachers, you know, you can think back at a time when you didn't have great self-control, or when you were in a classroom and a teacher didn't have great self-control. And you know that that emotional self-regulation is a really important skill to have and something very, very key to being successful in the classroom. Here's another great article that you can check out after the webinar, and it's called Steps Toward Daily Mindfulness. This is easy to search up, and I encourage you to do so. So what does the research say? The research says that mindfulness reduces teacher psychological symptoms of burnout. You mean, wait a minute, I'm actually going to like my job more. I'm actually going to want to be there longer. It's actually going to improve my classroom organization and self-compassion. It's actually going to make a difference in those areas. Mindfulness improves the ability to manage stress, the creation and sustenance of supportive relationships in the classroom, which promotes a positive classroom environment. So your administrators are going to respond to you in a calmer fashion. Your colleagues are going to want to collaborate with you because they know that you are able to manage your stress, that you are more organized, that you're happier to be in the position that you're in. All of this creates more social connectedness and people that actually want to be with you and want to work with you. Mindfulness reduces the teacher stress greatly, which in turn improves your performance as a classroom teacher. Mindfulness reduces your anxiety. It increases your emotional balance, which means that when you have to deal with those difficult students and those difficult issues, you're much more able to handle it. Maybe you won't bring as much home to your spouse, your partner, your children, your family. And that in turn will also increase your positive social relationships outside of the classroom, which then builds a better, stronger person in general. So I want you to think for a minute on how you reduce your stress on a daily basis. What do you actually do to try to reduce your stress, and what might you do now immediately this school year? What stress buster would you use? I know for myself, listening to music, whether it's calming music, whether it's actually just some country music or just some old hits, what helps you to feel happy or calm? Even stretching or a few yoga poses are good. Laughing with someone always reduces stress. What about when you're feeling really down? What about picturing yourself in a beautiful place? Just remove yourself from that difficult situation for a moment. What about sitting quietly and focusing on your breathing? Have you ever tried that? To just take a deep breath and see how you're feeling and how that might help you to calm down and put things in perspective. What about talking with a friend or a colleague, or reading a good book, or reading a good motivational story? What do you specifically do to reduce stress? And what can you implement into your life that will help you be more mindful and less stressed out as a teacher? So a couple of things you might think about that help you to be more grateful and to have happiness on a daily basis. Something that you can be a really good role model for your students would be to be grateful. I always tell my children when they go to someone else's house, be the most grateful child at that party. Be the most grateful child at that home. And that doesn't mean be fake. And that doesn't mean say thank you every 2 minutes. It means genuinely when someone is serving you a meal, when someone put a little extra effort into helping you, supporting you, inviting you to their home, inviting you to collaborate with them in a classroom, be truly grateful and let that person know it. Practice kindness on a daily basis. Your mindfulness in your reactions help you to naturally practice that kindness, to be thinking about the other person's perspective and how they would want you to respond. Paying attention, actually being reflective to the environment around you, what's going on, and making sure that you're being as sensitive to others as you possibly can be. Keep your friends very close. Know who the safe people are in your life, who the supportive people are, and keep them close. Be loyal. Drop grudges, let things go. That'll help you to feel better It's not good to stay with toxic people, but you can let those grudges go and know that most likely that has something to do with something in their own life that was taken out on you or that impacted you, but it really might not have been about you. And then get yourself moving. Exercise. Every minute you can be popping up and standing up while you work, while you teach. It's been really difficult with all the Zoom meetings and being in this pandemic. It's been harder to exercise, but I think that it would be really a key factor in your mental health and towards happiness if you could exercise. So right now you could think about each of these areas, or after the webinar, think of each of these areas and think of how you're going to implement them in your daily life and how you're going to really make a difference with your happiness level and your mindfulness on your mental health. So how do we actually teach kids gratitude? This is so important. People who practice daily gratitude actually reported fewer physical symptoms of unhappiness. They were actually happier. They actually had a more positive outlook about their lives as a whole. They were more optimistic in general about everything around them, about the world events, and in general, we're going to get through this together. We can do this, versus having a negative impact. You actually make progress towards your goals if you're feeling grateful for what you have. Then you can take on the day. You can do even more. People who practice daily gratitude also say they have higher levels of enthusiasm and determination. They have greater connection to others. They feel more connected, and they're more likely to want to help other people. So how can we specifically show gratitude? Have your students write thank you notes, texts, emails, verbalize their thank you to possibly you have a para-educator in your class, possibly you have a parent working in the class, a student teacher, a principal that comes in to share an announcement or to show some support to the classroom. Students can verbalize, they can draw a picture, they can write a note. I think this is really important to teach people to actually let someone else know that they're thankful. You can teach your students to count 5 blessings each day. What are 5 good things about their lives and about how their day is going? Also, teach your students to thank someone who's making a difference in their lives. Who is that one person that's their mentor, or who really believes in them, or who is really supporting them? And then all of these things, ask your students how they're showing their gratitude. They might be grateful in their heart for everything that their moms or dads or grandmothers do for them, or teachers, but are they actually communicating that gratitude? And that makes a really big difference in happiness, in mindfulness, and in social acceptance and social emotional connectedness. So what might be holding back that gratitude? Stress can hold it back. So be a role model in how you help your students deal with stress. We have talked already about exercise and how important it is to alleviate stress, to help get us out and mindfully think about the day, step by step in front of us if you're walking, but exercise is so important. How about communication and talking through problems and actually really sharing your feelings and how you possibly have messed up or how somebody else has made you feel? What about that actual really strong communicating with someone? Also practicing relaxation, self-calming, and mindful awareness skills. We've talked about some of those and we'll continue on with those. Teach that if you mess up, it's okay. You're not going to be perfect all the time. No one is, but that we can fix that and we can be better the next time by self-reflecting, by mindfully thinking through how that mistake actually occurred. We want to make sure that we're outlining clear rules and consequences, that students really know what those expectations are and how to rise to the occasion to meet those. And then what's going to happen if they do not follow the rules in a classroom. And we want to teach our students how to handle difficult situations And by us being mindful and very self-reflective and self-aware, then we're going to be good role models and we're going to show our students how to handle difficult situations. Obviously, my dog wants to comment on my handling of him right now. Also, telling stories and being realistic about effective coping. How do you legitimately handle something that's difficult? How do you handle a situation that's really bringing you down? How can you do that? Okay, teaching stress management. So we can teach our students that we need to be, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry, that we can relax in non-stressful times. We need to teach ourselves how do we relax. This is very, very difficult for me. I am very type A, and so I have a really hard time calming myself, and I have to teach my own children and my students this as well. What stresses me out, and how can I control those stressors? And I think it's different for everybody. And I think we need to teach our students how to look up what those stressors are and how we can try to not have those enter our lives. And then what are specific areas for each of our students to focus on? What is an area of weakness that our students really need to learn? One of the things I mentioned earlier, I do think that whole reaction time is having students learn to take a deep breath and be calm. I also think teaching students social skills, such as good listening skills, such as friendship skills, I think those are really key in helping our students develop positive friendship skills and group acceptance. Also, problem solving. How can we teach our students to react calmly to a problem and take it step by step in moving forward? And then that emotional self-regulation, our self-control, and mindful awareness of what's happening around us. This is going to help us to be a lot calmer if we can identify those stressors and be fully aware of how we can control those of what's going on around us. And then cognitive restructuring. I was working on this with my oldest child recently. It's something I've had to learn in my life, is that affirming self-talk. Push out those negative thoughts and say, no, they're not going to enter my brain. I'm going to reframe my thoughts, and I'm going to know that I have positive things going on, that I'm growing in positive ways, and I'm making a difference. Even if it feels small, I know that I have positive relationships, that I have positive goals, and that I'm enjoying my life in these different areas. So several of the social emotional learning competencies that work so nicely with mindfulness that just go hand in hand would be that self-awareness, focusing attention and self-compassion, self-management, resolving conflict more calmly, and saying how you feel in an emotionally balanced way. So it's that communication when you really need to share with someone your feelings. That social awareness, so increasing your empathy by regulating your emotions rather than getting emotionally overwhelmed when faced with a difficult situation. So it's the capacity to notice another person suffering and learn about their perspective. And then how you respond to that is going to increase as you're more and more socially aware. And then relationship skills is, we've talked a little bit about the intent on listening, about the caring, and making sure that there's compassionate understanding to different perspectives and different ways of life. And then decision making, increasing the cognitive flexibility and creativity, which gives a wider range of responses to challenging situations. The calmer you are, the more reflective you are, the more opportunities you have to make appropriate decisions and positive decisions that will move a scenario forward in a positive way. And the challenging situation may be alleviated with some calm responses and mindful responses. Here's a great self-management lesson plan that you can look up after the webinar. And you might want to review it and see how you could use this with your students or how you could adapt it with your students. And then be thinking about what other topics your students need. And you can share this in a small group at work or with a friend, a teacher friend, and see what you can do to increase your students' ability to manage their stress? And then what are you going to do for this year? What's going to be a goal in the area of social emotional learning and or mindfulness? Are you going to control your stress in better ways? How are you going to support your students with their stress and stressors? How are you going to teach social emotional learning or mindfulness using any of the strategies we just talked about? And then I highly recommend that you share it with an accountability partner, with your actual partner in life, with a best friend, with a colleague at work, with a classmate, and keep each other accountable for how you're going to be more mindful and more self-aware of the situations around you so that you can build greater connectedness. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey to be more mindful. It's helping me every day when I talk to people about this and talk to teachers and talk to friends, and it matters. So thank you so much for joining me, and I wish you great luck in your goal this year.